Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, we're going to have a build showcase into Pistol HeadHunters. I've been putting this one off as while they are very important builds, I'm kind of bad at them. Not exceptionally bad, but I'm not the greatest for them. But still, we'll try our best here as we'll go over especially the high-end and the Hunter's Fury variants of Pistol HeadHunters. We'll be combining the two of them together into one build showcase because they are very similar, but just used in different ways. I kind of feel you want to have both of them if you do enjoy the Pistol HeadHunters. And also while we're saying Pistol HeadHunters and not a specific weapon, we're going to be both using the Regulus and also the Harvest. And I'll be using as well in here, determined to kind of show the easy way of running it. But I very much enjoy these builds with Regulus, as you can pop some heads, and it actually requires a little bit of training to get there to a point where you're kind of acceptable at it. Both of these builds are very much builds that require quite a bit of practice to get good at, but even if you're okay at them, they can be really good to have. As with all build showcases, we'll go through it in basically two chapters. In the first one, we'll go over the build, its layouts and such with the build pictures, and together with that also some numbers. And then in the second chapter, we'll go and play around with the builds in some gameplay. So if you want to jump around, everything will be time-stamped down below so you can jump to where you want to go. Let's go start with the build layout. And let's start by first discussing what we mean when we say Pistol HeadHunters. Well, it's quite simple. We're using a pistol, either usually Regulus or the Harvest, and we're pairing that with Headhunter in some form. So Headhunter by itself is a chest talent where if we kill an enemy with a headshot, it stores an amount of that gets multiplied depending on if we're using perfect or normal, and we'll be using both throughout this showcase of a Headhunter. Depending on that, we will store 125% or 150% here with perfect as a stored amount, together with the current shot again on top, because we'll be taking a second shot. And because of that, we can actually escalate how big of an enemy we can headshot. Without Headhunter, we would be stuck basically, for instance, on headshot builds, either trying to go for instance, going really high with it with glass or with focus, and then with a really hard-hitting weapon, maybe adding Achilles on top. With Headhunter, what the gameplay becomes is that we'll start preferably on an enemy that we can just in one shot headshot, then we'll move up to the next one that we can do. And preferably we cap out at an amount, because here the damage is capped to either 800% if we don't reach 150% headshot damage. But if we do, and most Headhunter builds, if they're set up correctly, they will go way over this 150. We'll cap out at 1250% of our weapon damage shot. And what that means is that there is a cap to it. We want that cap to be high enough. We want our first shot to be effective enough to especially kill a red if we can. Then our second shot to be able to deal with either a red or a purple, or maybe even an elite if we can. And then effectively we want our cap to be high enough that we can deal with all of the enemy types that we want to deal with. With a Pistol HeadHunter, mostly that does not reach the point of names. Usually we will need to two-shot names still, or we can use other tools like our shotgun, or for instance that marksman rifle that I have there, or a rifle, to kind of increase our cap if we're expecting a named. But our cap will be high enough to deal with elites, and that makes these as well really good for just doing activities and such stuff where we don't per se go after names, including for instance not going so much for bounties or such, even though you can definitely use them for those. And then alongside of that Headhunter, we have two big important things, of course. So yeah, first of all, our headshot damage, if it is greater than 150, we'll get that cap alongside of it. Now, of course, the stored amount of this is based on our weapon damage. Whenever the game is talking about weapon damage, it basically means whatever your white damage is. So if you're not hitting, for instance, headshots, if you're not hitting crits, the white damage is what that's based upon. Now, in the case of this, that means that we want to stack weapon damage. We want to reach this headshot of 150. And then on top of that, if we can get more headshot or such, that's beneficial. So that's exactly what these build layouts will be in. Here with the high end where we'll start, because basically with the Hunter's Fury variant, which is the two variants we'll be discussing today, with the Hunter's Fury variant, we're just adding Hunter's Fury on top of this. Here we have the Chain Killer together with the Punch Drunk. The Punch Drunk is the named Douglas and Harding piece. What this has as its perfect stat is that it has 20% headshot damage, where normally it would, of course, just be 10. On all of these as well, if we can, we're putting headshot together with weapon handling. And the weapon handling does help out, especially with the Harvest, which is a little less accurate than, for instance, the Regulus here. And you'll see consistently on all of these pieces, we have headshot, weapon handling, and then headshot mods, if they have mods. And for instance, in the past, we would pair this with contractors and such. Then we would just have damage starters out of cover, and then headshot or DTA and headshot. Here, though, we're going with, nowadays, with Imminence Armaments. There's actually a case to be made in both ways of going without Imminence Armaments or with, and that'll come up later in the calculations. Imminence Armaments, weapon damage and pistol damage, an increased threat as well, but mostly I'll be using these builds solo. You can definitely use these in groups. We'll have a little bit of gameplay for in groups. This increased threat does actually work, and especially for a build like this that kills quite a lot, it will actually increase our threat, and that is pretty noticeable, but still not breaking, especially because we'll be using it mostly solo, and there it doesn't matter at all, because we'll be the only target the enemy will be focusing on anyway. With the three pieces, Imminence Armaments here on the right side, and then here I'm pairing it with the Dodge City. With all of these builds as well, we'll be using two exotics especially. Dodge City Gunslinger Holster here, especially with the high end, really fits in well. The other piece that we can use, and that's also why, for instance, here I do have an Imminence Armaments piece here for the holster, where now we have suddenly 4 pieces here. And that's actually as well how the build it is saved. So it is actually saved with 4 pieces of Imminence Armaments. I load the build, and then what I do is afterwards go and pick my exotic. So either I put the Dodge City in here, or I grab a Headshot Memento here. Either has its own benefits, and actually both with the Hunter's Fury and with the high end that we have here, I'll be using both variants. Now, of course, here we're stacking basically pistol damage and all weapon damage because of the Douglas and Harding and the Imminence Armaments, and then of course Chain Killer, and the first piece, Imminence Armaments, is that together with all of it being red cores. The more blue core we basically go, the less of our stacking potential we have there. And that is actually important. Here, with the Memento, for instance, we do gain a blue and a yellow core. That's also the way to kind of see this build is you generate enough damage with the build, as much as you kind of feel that you need. Now, in the case of pistols, we kind of need all the damage we can get. We'll see in a little bit in the calculations why. And then we try to support that with basically all of our other choices. So here I have, for instance, a Bulwark shield. And a Bulwark, of course, we can use with a pistol. Even here with just the Memento, with this blue and this yellow core, we're already getting 6.4 million on this. And that is, of course, a lot more than the 900K that I have there, even with some grading on these pieces. And of course, as well, we could take Technician on top, which I actually had a second ago with, for instance, an Artificer, to have that even be a little bit more potent. Then, of course, the weapons we'll be pairing that with is especially 2. The Regulus is its own thing, basically, where it is harder hitting than the Harvest overall, except if you put a damage talent on the Harvest. Its base is a little bit higher. We want this to have Detox as its second stat, and the Regicide, especially its Explosion, which it generates from that same weapon damage, which is also, of course, kind of in line already. We're stacking up into that with our for our headhunting, so this aligns well with that. And then, of course, this Explosion can just decimate whole waves or weaken them at least enough that a follow-up shot is a guaranteed headshot. Then, of course, Harvest. Harvest comes from generally from the Special Hoarder. When it is in seasonal mode, it is a seasonal item. Now, of course, for the current time being, if you're watching this video when it kind of comes out, It is also available from the mini Warhounds, and going forward, it'll always be like that as well. It is one of the seasonal items. What this is at its core is a 6.86 Magnum, but then with higher base damage, lower RPM, but we don't really care about that RPM. We're not really firing at our RPM. That's also why DPS isn't really important here. We're much more looking at our one-shot capabilities and basically our shot capabilities. We're generally not firing at our full RPM. We're in between trying to find the shot again, and that's usually going to take longer than the RPM really cares about. We do want detox here as well again, and especially on this one, of course, we can set the talent. So generally finding one with the damage stars out of cover, so you can optimize it and then free talent it. And then, of course, Determined is one of the big ones. We'll show that in gameplay as well, and it is super effective, but also a little bit cheesy. That is its downside. To me, it does get boring a little bit quickly. Of course, if you're just grinding, it doesn't matter. We want to go for efficiency. But also with the Harvest, you can go with different talents, as of course the source for the Regulus is the Iron Horse Raids, which I understand is not up for everybody. We'll, in those segments, kind of discuss actually in ways of going about getting it. Even if you are a solo player, there is plenty of resources available to go and get the Regulus. If you even wanted a little bit, not even if you really want to, no, even if you wanted a little bit, the Regulus is within reach for everybody. But it isn't as easily available as the Harvest, of course, so we'll be using that one as well. Let's go see the Hunter's Fury version for a second, as Hunter's Fury is very much the other way of running for Pistol HeadHunters. Now, Hunter's Fury, we don't have the bonuses for shotguns and SMGs are really active. We do have a shotgun and we'll use that sometimes, but the pistol is definitely still the main item here. And the main reason we do use this is for its Apex Predator talent. Apex Predator is a mark upon the enemy, which is basically a debuff, and they'll take a 20% weapon damage extra. Now, that is more than enough to make up for the amounts that, for instance, we get from the other pieces, especially because this 20% can be said to double dip into Headhunter. So our second shot and our cap shot is actually way higher than we would expect with just the 20% amp. And that is the main reason that Hunter's Fury does get used. It has other traits that are very useful because it has the stacking buff where it is a 5% amp on kill, and this is a self-multiplicative amp. This is one of the few that we could actually call multiplicative and kind of be correct, as it is multiplicative to itself as well, this kill buff. This stacks up to 5 times upon itself, and with this build as well, we'll quite often get a lot of kills with it, and that stacking on top will actually make it that it is much stronger than the high-end version if we are in range and if we stack up at this the stacking kill buff. Now, alongside of that as well, we have it disorienting enemies whenever they die near an, or whenever a marked enemy dies. Enemies within the radius of that will actually get disoriented. We will also get armor on kill and health on kill, which can be, of course, very beneficial, especially for running some directives like no regen, like hard to earn, that may make it hard to heal back up. And all of those things help quite a bit here. And we are wasting that first bonus, but because of that amp going into Headhunter and interacting that way, this actually still makes for a really good pistol build. Now, quite often the question between this is, and in the same way as like, what is better, a chest striker or an obliterate striker? Or, for instance, striker tech tank or heartbreaker tech tank? Quite often the question is the high-end pistol better or is the Hunter's Fury pistol better? And as the answer to all of those, as otherwise it would have been clear already, and you would already have a clear answer, is that it depends. Both of them have their bonuses and their downsides compared to each other. And for instance, in the case of the Hunter's Fury one here, it doesn't get to run Dodge City Gunslinger Holster, which is a really powerful piece for the pistol, of course. It doesn't get to run that very easily. So for instance, in the case, if I wanted to run Dodge City here, And I have that piece on this character as always because I do sometimes want to run it in that way. We would have to take the Hunter's Fury backpack. Now, both the Hunter's Fury backpack and the chest aren't really great. The backpack increases the range of that disorient from 5 meters to 10 meters, which can be actually pretty beneficial, but not as beneficial as we had a second ago in Vigilance. Actually, for a second, to discuss Vigilance real quickly, Vigilance by itself is actually one of the go-tos here. We especially on our first shot want our Vigilance or damages bonuses to be there. That's also why things like Unstoppable Force and such aren't really great here because we don't per se care how high our cap goes. We especially care about that first shot. Now in the case here as well, that's why I'll be using Bulwarks quite often with this build, is that as long as not myself is getting hit, but my shield or bonus armor is getting hit, then we don't actually lose our Vigilance. Our Vigilance doesn't go away until we get hit in our armor or in our health. So using the Bulwark, I can actually keep Vigilance up. And of course, for the first shot, if I'm doing it right, likely I won't be actually actively engaged yet. I'm starting the engagement at that point. So Vigilance will be up for that. And that's also why we're taking it here. And then if we lose it later on, yes, our cap will be lower and such, but not to a degree that it makes that great of a difference then, but it really helps our first shot. So Vigilance is one of the go-tos. But then actually, giving that up for the Dodge City can be a choice. Here with Hunter's Fury, that would mean taking the backpack, which isn't too great. That is actually the great strength of the high-end one, I feel. And then the Hunter's Fury one has the Disorient, has the Armor on Kill, and then also has actually a much higher cap because of the Hunter's Fury talent feeding into Headhunter. But yeah, Dodge City can still be used with the Hunter's Fury one here, because especially as well, if we still want to keep that Armor on Kill, for instance, to bypass a directive like this season's no regen, this could be a way to go. But then, of course, the way that we kind of want to go with this is generally the way that I go with the Hunter's Fury version is to take either a chest, well, on the chest, of course, we take a Headhunter, and then on the backpack, we either take Vigilance or Memento. So here as well, I have, again, a Memento available. Memento, especially solo, is really a great piece, of course. Once we charge it up, especially, we have that 3% regen. Here with the Regulus, it really makes a lot of sense to run a shield. We'll either run Bulwark or we'll run actually the Striker shield that is from Firewall. And then also actually, so if we are going this route, we even in this Hunter's Fury version, we have two options. As we discussed, there is Perfect Headhunter, but there's also Normal Headhunter. So there is a case to be made for both of these pieces as I try to find my DNH Headhunter here with Normal Headhunter. Now, the first shot of this with the DNH piece, because we're effectively just 15% more here on the combined weapon damage. Weapon damage and pistol damage, as it is here, for instance, being specific weapon damage, as I quite often refer to, they basically just get combined. So they are in the same pool, and because of that, it's basically 15% more, of course, here. That means that our first shot and our cap is way higher, but actually, this, of course, doesn't increase our intershot by 150%, as the Perfect did. This just does 125%. So our second shot is actually quite a bit weaker, 25% weaker on the stored amount, which doesn't translate into 25% less on the whole amount, because the whole amount of the second shot is the stored amount plus the current shot that we're taking. So it's only in that stored amount that it is 25% less. But especially because Headhunter goes into that stack as well, there's actually a case to be made, and we'll see in the numbers actually what that means. And there is actually practical applications for that in, for instance, this season, where with the modifier on, where we get a little bit more weapon damage, actually taking Chainkiller edges it out on the second shot that we can kill an elite with this, and we can't, or we can kill an elite with the Chainkiller, but we can't here with this chest. So there are kind of minor variances in that way, but here we've seen both of these builds kind of laid out. Let's actually go look at their build pictures and some of the variations in there, and more at their stats as well. And here, let's go to some of the build pictures. We'll start here with the high end, which on the build collection is 4.08. And of course, all of these will be linked down below, so you can go and check them out for yourself. As we discussed, we showed the stats already basically. We're going to stack headshot especially and weapon damage. And then whatever we can, alongside of it, we're going to take weapon handling. One of the traits as well that the high-end has going for it is that it has a lot more weapon handling. We have just more high-end pieces in here, so we can put more or weapon handlings in there on this high-end version. And because of that, it will actually feel quite a bit better, especially in the accuracy. It does matter a little bit, especially when you're moving around and such, how quickly it becomes accurate. The stability, not so much, because you're going to basically completely try to reacquire a target anyway after each shot, so you're not really dealing with recoil in the way that you are with some other weapons. You're just trying to find the next target. Accuracy does make a difference, so which we're getting from that. And also as well, actually, the Regulus and the Harvest Boat are actually not that quick of reloaders, and because of that, it does actually help quite a bit there as well. And here on this high end, the main build picture is with the Dodge City Gunslinger Holster. As we talked about, actually, it is kind of my go-to for it. And this is really the trait that I like the high end for quite a bit. With the Dodge City Gunslinger Holster, if we charge it up, and that basically just means swapping to a different weapon, and then just before we take our shot, we swap back to the pistol. And with that, we can actually take, with the Regulus here, a 16 million shot. Now, in the case of the Regulus, it's also important to understand that when we do the Dodge City Gunslinger shot, the explosion actually gets affected by it as well. So we're going to be using that sometimes, especially if we can, when enemies spawn, instead of just doing, for instance, a 4 million explosion, because actually the HeadHunter stack does not affect it in the same way. So once we have, for instance, we have the Regulus and we have several shots taken here in basically optimal conditions with grade 30, and then Vigilance is active and everything else is going our way, we can hit up to 19 million here with the Regulus, which is pretty impressive, just shy of killing a named outright, at least not without a modifier or such on top. And in this case, though, that will not affect our explosion. Our explosion would still be around that 4 million mark. But the Dodge City does actually affect the Regulus, and that combination is very, very strong. And of course, by itself gets used even as you can just clear out an entire wave in one go, because 16 million is more than enough to kill basically everything underneath a named. And here in the high end as well, we have it laid out with showing Eminence armaments, for instance, moving it from the backpack to the holster slot and then slotting in a Memento, as we kind of showed, which is kind of the alternate way to run these. All of these, basically, you kind of pick either Memento, Vigilance Backpack, or Dodge City. And you could make a case for any of them. It kind of does depend on your playstyle and such. I find myself quite often, especially with the Hunter's Fury, going for the Memento. And then with Technician, getting a much stronger Bulwark Shield. Otherwise, the other options are either to go Firewall or Sharpshooter. Firewall, especially for the health on kill, and then also the shield that we get from that. Also, whenever you armor break with that one, you will set the closest enemy to you on fire. If they're close enough, that is actually also really strong and will save your life quite often. Sharpshooter benefits from, especially for instance with this season having cool skills, that little bit of stability helps, but especially that drone is a thing that I find myself using quite often. A Revive Hive isn't that useful if we are using cool skills and we don't really gain access to our shield. Then otherwise, if we want to keep our Hive, I'd rather use the shield and then, for instance, have that drone out. And that drone can be out for quite a while, so we would just pop it and then just run around. Going on to the Hunter's Fury variant here, first off, we'll go with what I would consider somewhat the bog standard one, which is that we take Chain Killer and a DNH backpack with Vigilance. This is kind of the harder hitting one here as well. We're going with that Firewall, with this Firewall shield. But again, with this one as well, you could go basically any of the specializations we kind of discussed. And also the other layouts are kind of here. And again, either Regulus or Harvest. Here we're showing as well, the pieces, if you don't have either, and you don't have access to either, the Harvest is of course a seasonal item, so it's not always available. The Regulus you do need to do the Iron Horse raids for, and actually, you have to do the Iron Horse raid 3 times. You can get it done in 2 weeks if you have an alt character to help out, but generally for most people, this will be over the span of 3 weeks. So even if you start now, it will take a little bit. The other option is the just taking a police 686. Overall, this is the go-to because I still see some people recommending, for instance, D50s or Liberties. Ever since the rebalances of a long time ago, honestly, not worth taking. Also, the recoil of a D50 or Liberty is actually too horrendous for me to even really consider them. I generally, ever since they got changed, have been really happy to just use a much more usable pistol in the 686 and then by extension the Harvest or the Regulus that we always had. Here as well on this one we see that actually it caps out a little bit higher as we see in perfect conditions, but this is also with that on kill buff on top. Then we'll see actually a different variant here where we go to it with a Memento backpack. Very similar, but a different build picture. And on this one, I'm kind of showing it with that Memento backpack. As we discussed though, and as we'll see in a minute in the build or in the numbers for this build picture kind of, one thing we can do is actually go with the chain killer here as well. Chain killer would also be easier to get overall because this this Douglas and Harding chest is of course a little bit harder than a chain killer. Chain killer, especially if you do a bunch of countdowns with the named items, most people will have a one lying around. Quite often there's also on the vendors. It is with a perfect talent, so you just basically need the two base stats. And Douglas and Harding chest as well isn't too hard because it does come with a red core anyway, so getting the two stats and then having a free talentable one is kind of the way to go. But even if you get one that has either headshot or weapon handling and then Headhunter on it, you would be kind of fine. Even as well, if you get one, for instance, with high weapon damage that you can either kind of live with or you can optimize it up, just putting headshot there, missing out on one weapon handling isn't the end of the world. And then just putting Headhunter there instead. And overall, yeah, here we basically have that choice very much so. In the high-end one, we basically want to go chain killer because we can put the Dodge City as the mask anyway. Here on the Furies, we really want to, if as much as we can, avoid the backpack and the chest, of course. And the chest, it being a Headhunter build showcase, yeah, it needs to be there. Then as well, one we'll discuss a little bit later in, and actually one of the viable ways of setting up this Headhunter variant. Ever since Imminence Armaments came in, Imminence Armaments has enough of stats that actually the Ninjabag can be made to work. I overall still prefer kind of Memento layout for this, but this one overall is workable. It has its own benefits a little bit, as especially you can fast travel, for instance, to safe houses and such without losing your Memento stacks. Also, for instance, if you're jumping from DC to Brooklyn and such, you don't lose your Memento stacks, or if you're joining other players. But generally, I don't run Headhunter builds that much in group settings. But this does work out because we are getting the 3-piece bonus from Imminence Armaments with the Ninjabag together with the Hunter's Fury 4-piece, of course. So this is one of the rare occasions that there is actually a Ninjabag build in the build collection. And it caps out more than enough that it is more than usable. And even actually, once we have the on-kill buff up on there, that actually is more than enough than what we need. And this is definitely one of the ways to go with it as well, especially with the Regulus on top. It actually performs really well. We'll see all of these in action, but let's first go and look at what they actually put out. And for that, we'll come to this multi-calculators. As here we have a duo, the top one being here with a Regulus. We'll have two of them, and the second one being the Harvest. These are the somewhat newer ones where I have them set up for headhunting, and input happens down here. And then what we especially get out is a first shot, a second shot, a third shot, and a cap shot. And usually the third shot is either the cap shot or close to it. And we can set in all of our stats here as well with Memento stacks and grading. I am taking, of course, multiple builds here, and we can compare up to 10, and we can kind of compare what they hit for, especially on their first shot and their cap shot, which usually is the ones that I care about quite a bit. Because especially if our first shot can be enough to drop a red, or for instance, more so with MMRs and such, at least the purple, and maybe even start on elite or such, that can actually make quite a difference. And that's actually the build making here quite a bit, is trying to reach thresholds while still trying to maintain some of the other survivability, for instance, in the build. Because, of course, if we're taking, for instance, a Memento, we are actually losing quite a bit of damage compared to, for instance, just taking a Vigilance backpack, as we see here as well. But it only really matters if that is actually impactful to our killing potential. And it somewhat is, it somewhat isn't. And yeah, we'll kind of go over some of these. The HF here stands in for Hunter's Fury. The HE is the high-end. So first we have then this Fury variant and then the high-end variants. Here we have a Chainkiller plus Douglas and Harding Vigilance backpack, then a Douglas and Harding chest with a Memento backpack, Chainkiller with Memento backpack. Then we have Douglas and Harding chest with Dodge City, Chainkiller with Dodge City, and then also that Ninja variant that we showed a second ago for the Hunter's Furies. On the high-end side, we'll both look at it at a Dodge City variant and a Memento variant, and also actually look at the classic one, because there's actually an important trait to that as well. As the classic one is going with Contractors, Fox's Spur, and the Gift instead of the 3-piece Imminence armaments on that right side of the build, basically. In here as well, we're setting up our headhunting increase separately. That's also why I'm not using some of the parts of this build of this build calculator. As yeah, we'll set those separately. We'll also have just Hunter's Fury ones being affected by Hunter's Fury there, of course. And in here, yeah, we can kind of see already that the Hunter's Fury variant, here the Chainkiller and with the Dodge City Vigilance backpack, is actually quite similar to what we have here with the Imminence armaments with Dodge City on that first shot. While the high-end variant is a little bit ahead here, it isn't off by much, and there isn't humongous differences in that first shot. Here, though, we do have the proximity buff going, numbers-wise, for the Hunter's Fury. We don't have the kill stacks going yet. So actually, if this shot was maybe after we dropped some stacks and on our 5th kill, then actually, of course, it leans very much the other way. And it really depends on how you kind of see this as that kill stacking buff of Hunter's Fury really can push its damage pretty high and also push its cap really high. But for most of this discussion, we'll keep it actually pretty low on 0 with that kill stack. And of course, though, that does mean that actually numbers-wise, it doesn't completely work out, as actually the second shot will likely be with 1 kill stack because it's our 2nd kill, or we're going for a 2nd kill. And same for the 3rd shot, if it, and you know, cap shot and so forth. But just for simplicity's sake, we'll keep that at 0. But this is definitely one of those places to kind of play around with this. Also, we have our Memento and Grade on 30 here. Of course, the Memento does need to charge up. And that's what we'll see here as well, as actually the Memento version with the Dodge City or the Douglas and Harding chest here for Headhunter. We're dropping on that first shot around 15%, a little bit more than it, but that's of course with the Memento full. We don't start with the Memento full, and quite often we will lose it. If we lose it, we're dropping down even further. But there is an important metric here, and that is actually the one that I kind of care about quite often. If we scroll a little bit to the right, we can already see it over there. And that is that for a red, especially, as we have here some of the numbers needed to get a kill on certain enemies' veterancies. For a red, for regular assault, grenadier, and several of the other archetypes that are just basically at the normal amount of health, so there aren't rushers, snipers, or heavy gunners or such, or heavies themselves. Generally, you need basically a little bit over 2.3 to get a red kill, and then for the purple, with their armor and health combined, they're a little bit over 6.3. So if we have effectively anything, in my mind, the way that I keep this in my head is 2.5, anything above that is enough to kill a red, and 6.5 or above, anything is above to kill a purple. That's of course what we need to do as well to stack, because actually if we kind of go back a little bit, if we on our first shot, here with the Memento off, for instance, on the first shot with the Vigilance variant, our first shot can be a red, our second shot can be an elite. We are surpassing actually as well. As we scroll there a little bit, we have 9.89. I usually remember 9.9, or actually I just remember 10 usually. If it's over 10, you're likely going to drop an elite. Here we see that. Now we do need to keep our vigilance up, of course, and we need to be in proximity for the Hunter's Fury. And then on our cap shot, actually, we even surpassed that by quite a lot. Here our third shot also be our cap shot. Here with the Memento variant, we are dropping quite a bit, but of course with the Memento we're gaining other things. We're gaining regen, for instance, which can actually be very useful this season. We have no regen as our one of our directives. No regen has been fixed again as well, where it's just the out of combat regen not applying. So the regen in combat, so for instance from things like brand bonuses, or for instance the Memento, that actually does apply. So in combat you will actually regen, and that's one of the great traits of the Memento. And also we get a much stronger shield from it, not just by the blue and the yellow core, but we also get skill efficiency, which is skill health, so that actually adds into it quite a bit. Here, even with the Memento kind of off, we still have more than enough for red on the first shot, more than enough for purple on the second shot, but we can't shoot an elite yet. So either the first shot needs to be red, the second shot needs to be red or purple, and then from our third shot onwards, it can be an elite. And that is actually kind of the thing that you need to internalize about all of these numbers. It doesn't per se matter too much how much it does. It basically just matters what can it drop. Now, in the case of the Regulus as well, if there is an elite standing next to a red, I can pop the red. The explosion will do some damage to them. That will bring them in range to be headshot now. So there is basically that consideration that you kind of need to make. But overall, these numbers are especially important to kind of transpose onto what the health of the enemies is and what do you need to get them down. If we take that Memento back to full here, we see that actually once it's charged up, it kind of catches up, but also it doesn't actually come into a higher number, because here still this 9.2 is not enough to kill an elite, for instance, with the Chain Killer. And of course, the thing that the Chain Killer has going for it is that, yeah, its first shot is actually worse. Its cap shot is worse as well. Well, its third shot, which is the cap shot. But its second shot, it's so much better. Now, in this season, this actually does matter because we are close enough. We're on 9.2. We need 9.9. We have 30 grade, but what if we instead put 60 grade here, basically, which is in the same pool as our modifier? We can get 30 from the modifier if we're all green in that zone. And now the Dutch City, or the Memento variant here with Douglas and Harding, Headhunter, actually on the second shot can't kill elite, but the Chain Killer can. And this is kind of the considerations to make for these builds. Sometimes it does make sense because on the first shot, it doesn't make a difference, really. This is going to drop a red anyway. It's going to be 2 shots for purple anyway. It's going to be 3 shots for an elite anyway. You don't change anything there. But on the second shot, we can actually drop an elite here, which does make quite a difference. Then if we put this value back to normal, because yeah, the modifiers or, for instance, global events are available, of course, make quite the difference here. But we'll be kind of excluding them and kind of looking at them in general here because, of course, the modifiers change per season and, yeah, Reanimated isn't always there. But for instance, with Reanimated, one of the considerations to make is just to make yourself maybe way more tanky. And you can take several blue cores and actually still get an easy headshot to start off with. That's generally the way I go about it. But the main thing to kind of consider, and the thing that I want to kind of convey to you, is that, yeah, you really need to consider actually, does it make a difference? Because if I kill the first enemy with 3.4 million or 3.2 million, it really doesn't matter. It just matters that it's more than enough to kill that enemy. That's also, for instance, here where we go to the Dutch City, for instance, with the Dutch City Gunslinger holster on the Hunter's Fury one, as we discussed, we need to take the backpack slot and make that Hunter's Fury. That means that we are not taking Vigilance, we are not taking Memento, and that does suffer on the shots. But the first shot is still enough, if the rest of it is all red, to make it over the hurdle of killing a red. And as well, for instance, but we need actually now, and this is actually an important difference, 3 shots for a purple. We are actually not going to two-shot a purple, especially not with that chain killer one. On the second shot, though, yeah, we do have enough for a purple on both of them. And then on the third shot, we have more than enough for an elite again. And of course, what the Dodge City here also provides us now is that we can actually charge up a shot. And I have the values here just taken from basically in-game. And 14 million is more than enough to drop an elite. That would get stored in our amount. So then our second shot can also be an elite. Our third shot, then we would be already back to being a normal, basically, here on the Dodge City shot. And that would also be enough for elite. So actually, if we start with the Dodge City shot, we can actually just cruise with that onto getting just elites going. On that Ninjabag variant, even though the Ninjabag, of course, eats a lot into, for instance, not having that backpack talent, we also don't have the Dodge City bonuses. We still have more than enough because Imminence Armaments is so big. We still have enough for a red on the first shot, and our second shot is actually pretty high up there. Quite a bit higher, actually, than a lot of the other builds around it. Even with the Memento charged up, this actually still exceeds it. And our third shot actually caps out pretty high up there. Now, of course, what we could have is with the Memento, we could charge up the Memento, have all of those bonuses there, the regen, the bonus armor, the weapon damage from there. And also the skill efficiency actually feeding into a stronger shield. But of course, if we're, for instance, wanting to jump around the map and we want to be able to use safe houses, as for instance, especially for instance, if you're running around in New York and such, there isn't actually that many fast travel points, not as much as DC has. And actually having access to the safe houses where if you go there with a Memento, the second you fast travel to a safe house with a Memento, you lose all of your Memento stacks. So you're back down to 0. The Ninjabag basically has this from the first shot going, of course. So there is actually that trait, and that's actually why it is in the build collection. There is actually a reason to kind of have that be a way that you run it. Then we see as well the Imminence Armaments variants, the high-end variants here. With Dodge City and Memento, both of them actually, yeah, reach kind of around the same numbers, but a little bit higher, especially on that first shot. Because as we discussed, the second shot is where the Hunter's Fury really does shine, with that Hunter's Fury proximity buff going into it. But it does mean that you need to be close enough. It is a 15-meter range. The thing is that one of the downsides of the Hunter's Fury, especially if you're not in range, you're going to lose a lot of damage. With the high-end one, the range is less impactful. Now, of course, on the pistol itself, we have actually just a 60-meter optimal range on both of them, actually, on the Harvest and the Regulus, and I was totally not checking in-game, except I was, of course, to double-check that. That 1 meter extra doesn't matter, but the drop-off is still there. The drop-off is intense with the Hunter's Fury. It's just a cliff, basically, because you're losing that stacking buff or the proximity buff. And also your ability to get the stacking buff. For the stacking buff to trigger, the enemy must be marked. And also for the disorient to happen, the enemy must be marked. But yeah, the high end doesn't have that. So you actually, I find myself quite often taking shots in 15 to 20 meters range with Hunter's Fury and going, oh shit, I wasn't in range. And with the high end, that's less of an issue. There's of course a little bit, the drop off starts there, but the drop off ends way later. With the high ends as well, we have a much easier way of putting the Dodge City in there. We can see as well, the Dodge City shot is actually a little bit higher because we have more weapon damage going into it, especially because of that Imminence Armaments. Of note, actually, I don't have it here, but I should have included it, is that the Classic with the Contractors and such actually has a higher shot for the Dodge City. And that's especially due to Contractors and Fox being in there alongside of the headshot that we have there. But its main damage is actually much lower. That's why I'm very much leaning nowadays towards going with the Imminence Armament section of it. Even though we're giving up a little bit of damage on the Dodge City shot, it isn't actually that big of a change. It doesn't get us to a threshold. This 16 million is more than enough to drop any elite, and that's kind of what I'm targeting for. But on our second shot, especially here, of note is that the Classic, and also here with the Memento, even with the Memento charged up, we don't actually have enough to go with an elite, but then with the high end, now we do. with the high end, with the Vigilance Backpack and Dodge City. Not with the Dodge City shot, but just using the main weapon, we do get enough to go over an elite. And that is actually, yeah, makes quite a difference. Neither of these, though, actually really reach high enough consistently to, for instance, go after names and such, especially if you run into heavy gunners and such as names. They have way more than we can reach. This is also why these builds very much become, for me, the go-to for more activities and such. This was, of course, the Regulus one, but we basically see the same percentages carrying over into the Harvest. The only big difference is that, yeah, for some of these builds, the Harvest having a little bit lower on its base damage. As we see here, the base is quite a bit lower. And because of that, it actually does suffer sometimes, especially in that second shot category. A few builds that with, for instance, having the modifier on top would reach the elites, here generally don't. But of course, what the Harvest can get us, and here it is without a talent on top, because with a talent on top, we could actually gain a little bit more damage, but of course, what we can go with is Determined. And Determined can be very much easy mode for the game, and especially for farming, yeah, I completely understand going with it. For myself, I quite quickly find it a little bit boring, and also I feel a little dirty, to be honest. But yeah, that doesn't matter if nobody's watching, of course. Yeah, let's actually go and start looking at these builds in action. And let's actually take this out and take some shots out in anger. Here we'll take the Hunter's Fury variant first, here with Douglas and Harding Vigilance Backpack and Chainkiller to start off with. In a second as well, we'll try it with the Dodge City Gunslinger holster alongside of it. For this part, grading of course matters quite a bit. Here I'll be first using a Regulus without grading. We'll actually be using both graded and ungraded weapons to kind of show the difference that I can make. But of course here is one of those places where having grade 30 and applying it to a weapon really makes a difference. That headhunter cap gets raised quite a lot. That first shot becomes a lot more consistent. And especially as well, if you take it a little bit out of range sometimes, yeah, that can make all the difference to have it graded. Here though, just to start off, without a graded weapon to start off with. And let's go do that actually here in Brooklyn for a little bit, just for a little bit of change of scenery. I do like Brooklyn and its look. Here we'll be going up against, of course, Cleaners and Rikers, the factions over here. It really does matter what faction you're going up against, especially for instance with Determined. Here, sneaking up some enemies will open up. I am taking here as well as my specialization. We have Technician, and then also actually with the 5 directives on. And especially for this season's directives, but the thing is, with every season, it's a different can of soup. As this season, when we open it up, we do get things like no regen, we get things like the cool skills. Cool skills, of course, if I use my shield, whatever other skill I'm using kind of becomes useless. For this season, I've been enjoying a lot, basically tech tanking the shield up. The Artificer doesn't care if it has charges or not, so we're kind of using that in that way. And then also, of course, no regen, actually, either a Memento or the armor on kill, because not having any armor at all can actually become tedious really quickly. And instead of that, actually having some form of armor on kill, so for instance, either actually as well, putting in a Palisade piece is an option, but just Hunter's Fury variant by itself is actually really useful here. Here's what, actually, we have some... as I'm kind of talking and not paying too much attention, and I'm kind of not warmed up or as warmed up as I would like to be, but we'll do that kind of here by these enemies. I can be just standing in front of a bunch of enemies, taking shots and not being really in a big issue. Flanking can be an issue. I do need to watch out that enemies do stay in front of me and don't get to my sides, and I should watch out about dropping my stacks. Apparently we're fighting more, I think, than is intended, but that's fine. So a purple here for this build is 2 shots as long as I do have my vigilance up. And there as well, we see actually the Regulus explosion causing that other enemy to die. So in this case, the shot that we do, basically the first headshot, that is also our amount for the Regulus. And that means that that is more than enough to kill a red, as long as they're close enough. There is a drop-off when it comes to that, and then also they will bleed, so they'll bleed for a little bit as well afterwards. But as you can see already, especially with just having one tier on that shield, we're already actually having a pretty easy time to deal with these enemies because of the bulwark being very strong. Now, of course, with the Memento on top, we get even more. And actually, yeah. Speaking of Dodge City holsters, we'll take that one as well. And what I could have, of course, is that Dodge City Gunslinger holster alongside of the build as I have it here. And we'll take that actually next year. Let's actually go grab our loot here, of course. And let's do the same, but now, instead of having the Vigilance raising our cap and our first shot, let's actually do exactly the thing with that Dodge City, as I actually take the wrong item. I basically, for this character, have always the backpack, a Hunter's Fury backpack for them. This way I can always, swap to a Gunslinger holster. We won't take the one that just dropped. We'll just prepare that one to be deconstructed over the weekend. But here we'll take my optimized one, and let's go actually use this one in anger. And let's take that Dodge City indeed. What the Dodge City does is we gain a stacking buff for every 0.3 second that our pistol is holstered. So if we're on a different weapon, it's a 30-second timer for it, and effectively once it is fully charged up, it is 1000% extra weapon damage. What that means is, in the case of the Regulus especially, is that our explosion also is affected by it. So here I am holding my shotgun there, and actually the other weapons that we have here are actually items I will use here and there. The shotgun can be really useful for breaking armor plates, especially if I need a little bit more range. The 1886 can also come into play. Here though, with the high end, it's a little bit more useful. Here with the Hunter's Fury, where I want to be within 50 meters anyway, I'm going to be mostly using my Regulus or whatever weapon I'm using here. Here we also have two enemies close to each other. I'm gonna try to make sure that I get it in there, and we hit that other enemy also for 13 million there. Now, in the case of the Dodge City, you do want to make sure that your first shot definitely goes in. With Headhunter, if I miss, I don't lose my Headhunter. Unless I hit a body or it times out, I lose my Headhunter. But for the Dodge City, it does actually, if you miss, that's whiffing the shot, and that's that shot gone. Trying to find where the last one is. And of course, it took me so long that I actually have lost my Headhunter stack there. And I've got something for you. But yeah, you do want to actually land that shot. That shot is very important. If you just miss, if you just whiff it, you just lose it. Where with Headhunter, it's not as important. That shot, though, is also quite often happening out of combat, and because of that, yeah, you should just take your time and make it go in. Here, clearing out this territory pretty quickly. With the Dodge City, what we get as well is actually that, that we can charge our shot up multiple times, even while we have the Headhunter stack, of course, and such. In a lot of places, that's not going to be useful or anything, but especially if we, for instance, have an enemy. If I just had an elite, or if I just had elites, one thing I do have is, if you go back and look at, for instance, the shots that we did there, the second shot was still actually holding the stored amount of that Dodge City shot, which means that your first shot and your second shot is going to be very much affected by the Dodge City. Because of that, we can actually start on elites a lot easier. And that, of course, can matter quite a bit, as, for instance, public executions here are mostly elites. Now, we have some reds here in the corner as well, but I can actually start on an elite, and I might try to actually get in range to do so. Still want to be in range for the Hunter's Fury stack to be active as well. And here, I'm gonna take that shot. There wasn't anything else in range for the explosion, but as we saw there as well, the extension on the range for the disorient actually helping out a little bit. It is too big of a damage loss to really consider it a good idea, but it's still doable. I have an extra patrol with me as well, and I was already concerned as to why there were so many rushers. But yeah, it'll be fine. I'm gonna actually just put I thought I still had a stack there. Sometimes you also just have to take the shots and just break some stuff, and then just build up stacks again. So yeah, we have extra patrol here. Let's go deal with them. That also still give me some reds. And one of the reasons I do use the bulwark is, as you saw there, it took quite a little bit of beating. Again, a full red build basically with just technician. That's enough already to make that bulwark usable. And of course, with the artificer alongside of it, where with this season that also makes sense because we couldn't have a revive hive next to it without, well, it always being on cooldown effectively, because I want to use my shield. My shield is getting used quite a bit. Here again, the disorient kind of slowing some stuff down. The classic hitting the weak point, of course, with the Headhunter stack. But that also still weakens the enemy anyway. One thing to always watch out for is that, yeah, as you're getting hit and stuff, you have a bunch of screen shakes. That's also why it's actually a lot harder while you're getting shot at for you to actually land your shots. Sometimes just slow it down, just get the shot in, wait for animations and stuff. Half of this style of build is aim, the other half is also game knowledge quite a bit. Knowing the animations that enemies do, especially for instance while they get disoriented or while they jump over things and such, makes a lot of difference. The aim really does matter, of course, and that's also one of the reasons why, for instance, on controller and such, I can kind of understand having a little bit more issue landing the shots as needed. But then also we have some workarounds for that as well, of course, because we can go determined, and let's see that next. As indeed, let's go to the other main weapon here, because while the Regulus is definitely the go-to for a lot of people, I also like the Harvest, even if we're not running determined, mostly because one of the things you can do with the Harvest is, for instance, that preservation there or other talents. You can also just take, for instance, as a lot of people do, flatline, and then together with sharpshooter and its drone, or with Achilles, that counts as a pulse, so you can take it that way. And for instance, as a starting shot, you have a much bigger bonus, and then the other shots doesn't matter. Once you get going, you kind of got and going. But determined is, of course, the big one. It's the big elephant in the room. With determined, for those uninitiated into it, if you basically get a headshot, and you would want non-named basically, or non-perfect determined, because we also have the Prophet, of course, being a named 686 Magnum. But perfect determined actually doesn't work in the same way as normal determined, where effectively, as long as you have the determined buff, which you get from getting a headshot kill, so the initial kill needs to be a headshot. From there on, you can body shot. As long as there are no helmets in play is usually the caveat. Here though, going up against cleaners as I am, we won't see any helmets. Again, I'm holding my shotgun just to charge up my Dutch City. We are still running that Dutch City kind of variant. And here going up against the territory control against cleaners, where they do have shield guys, but the shield guys, you can shoot them on the shield and that will actually kill them. I just need the first shot to be a headshot. I have Dutch City to achieve that very easily. From here on out, we can just poke, and as a did you know that this guy's head is that knee pad? As yeah, determined of course can make things very easy, but there's also nothing wrong with that. If you are just farming, if you're just trying to get shit done, just get shit done. As I do know, there is some vocal parts of the community very much against headhunting with determined. I would say they should mind their own business. One thing I generally don't do though is use determined in group settings. In group settings, if you're just doing that the whole time and just stealing all the kills basically, that's not fun for your allies. And that does still matter. Even if you are trying to get shit done, it's nice for everybody to kind of feel that they're contributing. But yeah, with determined, we can get things done real quick. Let's actually see that a little bit more in action. And also here to kind of show our different tools as well. As I do also have that shotgun, for instance, here. We'll be going up against elite territory control here. This will likely end with a cleaner heavy at the end of it. One of the things I use the 1886 for is more long-range shots. Now, with the Hunter's Fury variants, I don't tend to use it as much. I'll just stick with the pistol, as we do have some bonuses going towards that. But the shotgun I end up using, for instance, for breaking armor plates, as especially the shotguns, they scale quite a lot because they have a very high base damage, of course, quite a lot with Headhunter. And as long as we have some Headhunter already stacked into it, it will actually be able to take care of, for instance, the armor plates of a heavy. Here, again, taking the determined, I do need to start basically with a headshot kill, although actually here with this, of course, all of these will be elites. Now I'm gonna do a thing here where I weakened that enemy, so he's now weakened enough to be a one-shot, or when I have a stack to be enough to be the second shot. I'm gonna talk in and not thinking getting things done, but there, I'll kill that guy. I weaken this guy enough to be my second shot, and we'll store that mana. We have now enough for elites. That is actually one of those tactics, one of those tools for the toolbox that you really need to have. Sometimes, if we're just fighting all elite enemies, you want to weaken one enemy, then kill the other, and then then use that weakened enemy as your stepping stone. It doesn't matter how much health and armor they have, it only depends what your shot would have done in any way for Headhunter. So it's not a weakened enemy doesn't give you less, or if an enemy has less stacked in there. There we saw, for instance, that I have now more than enough for, we have 60 million there. That is more than enough for dealing with elites even, but not for this heavy, for instance. I'm going to take out my shotgun. I'm going to aim towards the head. We didn't actually pop it, but as you saw there, we did basically a little bit over 12 million to that head. And I only landed 5 pellets. I should have aimed it a little bit more. I should have gone a little bit closer, but we can of course deal with them there. One thing you can do with these heavies as well, if you miss out your shot, is actually shooting out these weak points. Now, one of the things with those weak points is that backpack weak point will make him take off his helmet for heavies, for cleaner heavies. The downside of it is it will eat up your stack, or if you have determined will still make it go to the head, basically. So that damage will still go to the helmet instead of that weak point. With the Regulus, you can actually shoot weak points. With determined, if you shoot the weak point, it will still go to the head there. I'm trying to spot where this last guy is, but actually let's go get the loot, then he'll get marked. I've gotten very used with this season that we do have things like the markers and such from the modifiers, for instance, yeah, lighting up enemies. Here we don't have that, but once I grab this last one, he should get marked, except he doesn't, of course. I'm gonna guess he's somewhere over there. Yeah, we have lost our Headhunter stack, so yeah, this won't be a one-shot kill, but we'll still get a headshot out of it wherever we hit him on the body, and then we'll just follow that up, of course. Learning especially, yeah, to use your tools, and then also, for instance, doing that step up or setup for a step up. That's actually pretty handy tools to have. So here as well, that shotgun, especially with Brazen. Now, Brazen here, of course, on that first shot isn't going to apply. The reason we still keep Brazen is if I actually in there, and I should have done that, I hit with 5 pellets. I needed to hit with 6. That would have triggered Brazen, but actually follow-up shots would be much stronger with this shotgun. And because of that, we could still, if I don't break it on the helmet on the first shot, I should just take follow-up shots and try to get those 6 pellets hits and then make use of Brazen. But here especially, yeah, and Harvest with Determined is really a powerful tool and can make things really, really quick. Here we took it up against some of the elites and such. That's not its strength. Let's actually do something really quick with this. And for that, let's sneak up on this elite supply convoy. There'll be a lot of them here. And one of the things that Determined especially does have going for it is that, yeah, it can actually be extremely quick, because once we have Determined going, we just body shot. And especially if we know where everything's going to spawn, there we still took our time, as I was explaining and such, but yeah, this of course is like shooting outcasts in a barrel, except cleaners. And again, in the case of the shield guys, actually, I can just shoot them on the shield there. Now, at some point, I hit something and lost the stack, but there we killed an elite convoy in seconds. Especially when we know where they spawn, we can just spam fire into there. We don't need to hit the heads. And with the Regulus, we could have popped the heads and, of course, made an explosion happen and killed everything in one wave, but that's still not as easy as just firing into that barrel of fish. And that really is the strength of the harvest. And we'll see it later on as well, a little bit with the tournament again. There is nothing wrong with running it this way. The one downside for me is, and I find myself doing that quite often, I get bored of this quite quickly. One thing that I can maybe give as a tip is that usually if I'm running the harvest, I still actually try to aim for the head. Even if I'm running Headhunter, I'll still try to aim for the head and keep my aim up. And then it's one of those of like, okay, oh, I missed, you know, but it's the safety there. Now, of course, the damage challenge could actually push this a little bit further. Let's actually move on to the Hunter's Fury with the Ninjabag. And moving on to the Ninjabag variant, this is one of the very few Ninjabag builds within the build collection. And this is also because it kind of works, actually, because there is enough damage here with the Imminence armaments for us to make up for that loss of, for instance, the Vigilance backpack or a Memento that we could go with. And in this case, there is actually some benefits here. What I find quite often, what I'll use these kind of builds a lot for is just doing a lot of activities and such. In the case of activities, you want to be able to jump around quite a bit and fast travel to wherever you want to, and especially safe houses are kind of out of the question the second you have a Memento on there. And the Ninjabag doesn't care as much about it. Here, it does still have enough bonuses for us to be worthwhile. So here we are taking that 2-piece Imminence Armaments bonus basically, we're taking 2 pieces for the 3-piece bonus with the Ninjabag on top. And of course, we still have the full Hunter's Fury there. That gets us enough damage for it to be worthwhile, and then we don't have to deal, per se, with the Memento stacks, as useful as they are with the regen and stuff on top, but we don't, if we, for instance, want to be able to jump around for priority objectives and such, it makes it a little easier to go this route. We'll be pairing it here as well with Technician again, with the Artificer, and that especially aligns with the 5 directives of this season. Having cool skills there, really, it doesn't make sense to have a Revive Hive here. In seasons where we have, for instance, the Scavenge skills, that actually makes perfect sense. And then the shield actually is a little less useful because every time that you put out the shield, you need to pick up a Scavenge skills. Whenever you put it away again, you need to pick up a Scavenge skills to get it out again, which can actually be tedious. It means that you can't be as mobile with it as you would want to. The shield still becomes one of the strongest things that you could pick, but a little less so. Then here as well, we are going to go now to graded weapons. I'm going to grab my grade 30 Regulus here, and also later on we'll take a grade 30 Harvest. And yeah, pairing here again as well with a shotgun, here though with an MR. The choice between an MR and taking an 1886 really comes down to the MRs have a little bit more damage. The 1886, while a little less damage, is a lot easier to use. Sometimes it can actually be handy, especially here where we don't have the Dutch City, to, for instance, take the first shot with that MMR. Even though we are not getting the bonuses for instance, the Imminence Armaments fully, because we are still getting that 5 weapon damage, but not the 60, it will still hit quite hard. So there are places where we can make that choice. And then here on the shotgun here, instead, I'm taking Pummel, and we might actually sometimes use the shotgun for multiple shots, and then Pummel does come into play. But yeah, let's go see this one in action. And for that, we'll take it up against some hyenas here. And specifically picked this one because it has a heavy, and the heavy named hyena we'll have to deal with, and their helmet especially. And also, hyenas in general are not really the faction we want to go up against, as they have a lot of helmets. The rushers have helmets specifically. And we have to deal with those helmets. They prevent the headshot from happening from the start. There is some tricks we can use there, as for instance here as well. Again, the Hunter's Fury buff showing me actually where all of these enemies are. I do have a Regulus, so I'm going to actually pop that head. And avoiding me having to deal with that rusher just by eliminating basically them through that explosion. And we can do that actually because they will follow us around, of course. So I can make them chase me into another enemy. And sometimes I do that if there's an enemy nearby. Most of the time, it is just going to be faster to just deal with them on the spot here. We'll go deal with the next room here, as that first room was just that singular wave. I should still have my Headhunter stack, and I'm going to go for the weakening that shield guy, and then we're going to pop the red here. follow up with... Actually, we do have a purple there. I wasn't in range enough for that elite, but now we're actually charged up enough. I'm gonna leave this rusher till last if I have to, or actually I'm gonna try to. Oh, and we have a heavy there. We'll take that stack there, actually. Now, one thing we can do is just keep shooting and just pop the helmet there. And yeah, that heavy should have a heavily damaged helmet. Oh, actually, I didn't hit the helmet. I hit the chest, apparently. But yeah, we can always follow up. And especially with solo scaling, like, we can get through stuff. Enemies are not as chunky. I'm gonna wait for my shield to be back. And now we have that shield again. I'm just gonna push into here. If that sniper turret shoots me in the back one time, that's not too big of an issue. We do have, actually here, 4 directives now, as I found myself kind of talking and playing, actually, is a little bit harder, and especially with a build that, yeah, again, I'm not the best headhunter. Was getting a little frustrating as I found myself getting flanked quite often. As when I'm talking, I can't listen as intently as I often would. Now here, actually, one of the things we could use is we have a bunch of elites and 1 sniper there. As I talked about, that marksman rifle on my back, although we still want to get the Hunter's Fury buff, so we still want to get close enough to get a big stack going with it. Let's reload it actually here. Let's actually take a stack with that. Well, actually, without the Hunter's Fury buff there, that wasn't per se worth it in the end. We do have 2 elite shields. I'll weaken one of them, and this rusher will be my starting stack again. And seeing as that one is weakened, the disorient really not helping. This should be enough to pop this guy's helmet. We can actually leave him weakened. We'll pop that guy. This guy is weakened. We'll use him as our secondary. Now we're up to the point where, yeah, an elite can be killed with 1 shot. And we're gonna waste that on that guy's shield. Because, of course, we are. And yeah, but we can now push in. The last waves will spawn here. This is the last room. Let's try to get an explosion going, especially, although, yeah, the disorient rounds are very tedious and very annoying always. Flamethrower grenade launcher, that's not the greatest. I'm hoping I can actually pop that. But especially here, what I want to show is once we get this guy gone, and especially as well a little bit of a stagger, I'm going to actually reload this shotgun. I'm going to stick this into his head, and that will pop the helmet. That's all I needed from that shotgun there. And that is actually a very important tactic and tool. Popping the helmets on some of these heavies, especially named ones, yeah, it is really handy to have that shotgun there for that. The MMR can also be useful, as I'm trying to find the shot here, but we don't have a full stack anyway, but we can put out follow-up shots. I don't want to go for our weak point, which is definitely an option, but here I don't want to per se because it will blow me up as well. And there we took care of them, even though a little bit dirty, but I especially wanted to deal with that heavy with that shotgun. And that is what that tool is especially for. If we have a full stack, that shotgun can hit way harder. Same is true for hitting warhands, but then they would try to hit them in the legs, where it would transfer directly into their health pool and just take them down. Here, this Hunter's Fury variant is definitely a little bit weaker, and I don't mind it as much, especially if I'm using it for activities. But here, for instance, taking it up against some names and such, these pistol builds aren't per se designed for that. But let's take it up against actually an activity, and let's do so with an harvest with Determined. And let's kind of make this look at least semi-decent. And if we just take it up against some activities, because that's basically what we did there with the hyenas bounty, it's kind of the worst case scenario to put any of these Pistol HeadHunters into. And it still dealt with it fine enough, even though the controller behind it, me, wasn't doing a great job. But against activities, now here going up against Black Tusk, there is one new concern we need to deal with, and we see that there, which is getting disrupt around it. But we can still deal with that. And then Hunter's Fury here, does work out well enough, and that's also why I don't, for instance, have a high-end version with the Ninjabag. Even though you could make it, not having the Hunter's Fury's extra bonuses in the armor on kill and such kind of gets in the way. And yeah, even with Determined there, I'm missing those shots. Let's actually be in range. And the Disorient there as well, actually saving us a little bit.
System disrupted.
The true power of these is especially in stuff like this, where we can just tear through an activity very quickly. Now, that isn't that flashy or anything, but it is actually very useful, of course. And that is because, of course, when we're using pistols, even though here actually we're still on the same character on that same session, but I swapped some directives, and of course now Pistoler doesn't want to turn on. But generally, pistol builds can deal with all 5 directives. Now, as we talked about already, for instance, this season being with the directives that we have, like cool skills and such, and no regen, it will lean a certain way. So for instance, for me, no regen leans towards Memento, cool skills leans towards, for instance, not going with a revive hive, but with the artificer instead. And seasoned with scavenge skills, I would take a revive hive, for instance. But in all the seasons, we have ways with these builds to deal with 5 directives pretty efficiently. And of course, that is what they are used for. Especially, for instance, here, we're running again with an Harvest, here the grade 31 on that same build. And we're making easy work, for instance, here of a Propaganda. Now, of course, normally this wouldn't be that hard either with 5 directives or such. There are many builds that can do it. So, for instance, otherwise OD is an option if you don't want to run headhunting kind of builds. Tempest builds having come in, for instance, the Pistol HeadHunter or the Pistol Tech Tank, either striker or high-end, that I've recently kind of really enjoyed, especially 4-5 directives. They can deal with it as well. But yeah, the pistol ones here, of course, as well. Using Determined, we can really go pretty fast and deal with waves upon enemies and just kind of go by, make it go by quickly. As for instance here, another patrol on top. Now, of course, we don't need to deal with this, but just poke, and gotta catch them all, right? This can be very effective for all of this kind of stuff. As that's then also, of course, what I use these kind of builds on. You're going up against a public execution. Propagandas and public executions especially are really good for when it comes to their XP. Either doing these or control points is really the fast ways of leveling in a general sense. Now, of course, on top of that, if you can bounty cheese, and that's why, for instance, the case of getting some bounties, for instance, is actually very useful. And for me as well, the zone that we're in here in West End is actually the zone that I farm in quite often. And with here Determined, we can make it very easy and just, yeah, tear through there, an extra patrol on top, although they helped out as they provided a red to start on. But here, especially them spawning over here, I can just very easily deal with this entire public execution without really needing much on top. Now, this, even without the graded weapon, could do basically exactly the same, and that's also the thing with it. It is a very simple style of build, both of them, not per se this negotiator one, but just in general, to put together and get yourself onto 5 directives. And from there, then you can work on improving. Now, of course, the one piece that is time-based mostly is the Harvest. The Regulus is always available, but also will take a few weeks to get to. But you kind of do need them for their power, and missing out on them can hurt quite a bit. Let's move on actually to the high end, as indeed let's move away from Hunter's Fury for a second. As especially here with the high end, what it has going for it for me is that you can have Dodge City and you can have Vigilance together with Headhunter, of course, where with the Hunter's Fury we really can't in that way. Of course, we're giving up all the benefits that Hunter Fury has, but also we're giving up some of the constraints that it has in, for instance, its range. With this one, while the Regulus is optimal range-wise, only up to 16 meters, its drops off pretty, it's up to 30 meters, still somewhat effective. And in this case as well, we can actually shoot in those ranges without losing too much. We just lose what we lose in optimal range, not also what we lose in, for instance, getting Hunter's Fury kill stacks or getting the Hunter's Fury buff going. And the high end definitely has a place there where I enjoy it quite a lot as well. Here, let's take it into Lincoln and kind of show as well the difference between running it, for instance, with a Regulus and how we run it with that, and then also with the Harvest. This is a mission where a lot of enemies spawn from closets, basically, and we want to get them as dead as quickly. Now, for the Regulus, the explosion will come into play quite a lot. For the Harvest, of course, we just have to shoot enemies anywhere on their bodies. But here in Lincoln as well, they have helmets. So we do want to shoot them smartly, effectively, where we don't want to waste our stacks too often and give ourselves a way to work ourselves back up. We'll see this one with the Dodge City here especially. We could definitely, this high-end as well, take it with Memento. But overall, I feel if you're going Memento, the Hunter's Fury one makes a little bit more sense. Here as well, we'll take it with Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter will give us a little bit more stability. Now on this build, on the high end, we also have a lot more weapon handling, so it's not as impactful. But I'll be taking it as well for this drone as my secondary, as we are still on 5 directives, although in this case, 4 directives, because Pistolero, as with a lot of people, doesn't want to turn on for me right now, as I've been swapping a bunch of characters around here. But we'll be taking it here for the drone and, of course, the awareness that brings alongside. And let's indeed take this into here. One of the downsides here for this season's set of directives is that actually no regen is kind of harder to deal with than some of the other ones. So for instance, hard to earn actually would not be too hard to deal with. And that would also be on top of it one of the reasons why I would go with Sharpshooter, because we are shooting a lot of heads. We are generating from that a lot of specialization ammo. And because of that, we would actually have an easy time with med packs. But instead here in this season with no regen, I would actually say that the Memento is a really good tool to deal with that. But we don't have that here. We could take Gunner instead than the specialization that we have now. Or we could take a piece of Palisade. Overall, I would likely give up, well, it depends. You could give up the Dodge City for it. Or give up the Chain Killer for it to get a Palisade piece into here. With the Harvest as well, we could take, for instance, Preservation there, which on headshots, of course, is even 20%. Here I put my drone at and waited out the cooldown on my shield. Once this drone is out, of course, it's out for a while. Here we'll show actually what the Regulus really is all about, and that's big booms in small rooms. So here we have a bunch of enemies spawning from small rooms, and we make big booms in small rooms. This is really where the Regulus can shine, is just eliminating entire waves, especially if they all spawn together, and also are, for instance, here, there's barely any elites, and there as well, we didn't get any heavies, which is randomly possible here, and will make it actually a lot harder to go through. I'm gonna pull up my drone again. I'm gonna push into this wave. As you can see, not my first attempt. And yeah, I did get murdered once here already. But that will sometimes happen, especially when trying to talk and play at the same time. In my defense, it did spawn 2 heavies on top of me, and it wasn't even the boss wave yet, so I am totally not pissed off at the game. But yeah, we will try to hit our headshots. And then, of course, miss. One thing that actually really helps with the headshots is actually standing still, I find. So if we actually run around and we try to hit our headshots while strafing or moving, it actually makes it a lot harder, especially with when it comes to the Harvest. And instead, coming to a complete halt, aiming and then taking the shot really makes a difference, to a degree that actually that's the thing I've been recently really practicing, of just running in, taking a halt, and then taking the shot. Here, of course, on the heavy, as we showed with the recent movement video, is we can actually kite him around. And yeah, if you haven't watched that yet, the Toolbox series, well worth watching. But this guy is very, once he is alone, very easy to deal with. Of course, I'm gonna take out my shotgun and get that helmet. It is now heavily damaged, even though I didn't actually, I might have taken too long and my stack might have gone away. And now we'll work our way through that helmet. I could, of course, go for the backpack, but it's also not per se needed, because also once we're this close to him, he's mostly going to go for the melees. And while he's doing that, he's not actually murdering me a lot. And my shield can take a few hits. Even without the Artificer there, even without that skill tier from Technician there, it can work out really well. Now, there actually, especially what I wanted to show, we showed where we take the Regulus and we eliminate complete waves as they spawn. Let's now take the Harvest and see what the differences really become when we change that weapon out. And here, let's take in that Harvest. I'm gonna actually already pop at this drone and yeah, hold a different weapon to get our Dodge City shot charging up. Especially if we can land that Dodge City shot, it will make it a little bit easier. Although here in missions, actually, we don't have that many elites. This will be mostly reds and purples. We might see an heavy, and of course, yeah, I did actually miss my shot there because of course I do. From now on, though, we don't per se, yeah, we don't need to headshot. That is the strength of the Harvest, but also we don't get that room clear that we had a second ago. That guy will eat up our headshots, determined there, but that's kind of fine. He was a red, he was going to die to one shot anyway. One thing to sometimes do, especially if we get like a purple one or something, I might pop his helmet and then shoot a red and then shoot that purple LMG guy. Let's push into here. I'm gonna try to keep my drone with me here. I'm gonna go send it forward. We do still have Headhunter, yes, and that, for instance, would be likely just outside of the range of a Hunter's Fury, but there it still was, you know, we don't have a range here per se. We still want to be within 20 meters or 25 at most, but we don't need to have that Hunter's Fury mark up at all times. The downside of it, though, is as well, that Hunter's Fury mark does show where enemies are, especially, for instance, when they're spawning in here. It does show where they are, and especially with the height of it, if you pay attention to it, you will notice that, for instance, heavies have a much higher mark on them. So if you see 3 marks and one of them is a little bit higher, you know the heavy is coming here. So there are actually tricks like that with, for instance, Hunter's Fury. I'm gonna wait for my drone to be with me. Let's get that reload in. I should actually be charging up my Dodge City here a little bit. With the Dodge City even a little bit charged up, I can also start on a purple, which actually makes a difference as well. Here again, a red one. I'll take them out alongside of it. And yeah, once we have the tournament going again, I shouldn't actually, I still kind of am aiming for the heads. I should just take the quickest shot I can, body or not. Missing doesn't matter. Outside of the Dodge City, it doesn't per se matter if we miss or not. All of these ladies won't have helmets. This always spawns Grenadiers and Rocket Launcher ladies. That heavy is the only real danger here. It did eat my shot, but it went into his helmet. I was actually trying to not hit him, but we'll follow that up and finish him up. And yeah, the Thurman definitely, as an easy thing, is much faster, but the Regulus being able to clear out entire waves in its way can be faster. So there's a reason also why the Regulus gets used as much as it does in speedrunning. Let's actually see this one a little bit more in action, but then just in activities. And now let's just take this against some activities just to show that and kind of the power of it. Here we've taken Firewall instead. Firewall has a bunch of benefits here. Its med pack is really good. It also gives us access to this shield for some extra upfront damage. That can be actually the difference maker, especially if you don't have grading. If you can get your first shot to be with that, to benefit from that. I'm going to use my decoy instead here. I'm going to really walk in that headshot there because it was a Dodge City shot, and I really wanted that to connect. I'm going to pop this heavy, and actually I left that red on the right there on purpose. He is my build up to build up against the next wave coming out here. And yeah, with determined, especially once we kind of get the hang of it going, it is really easy to make that work. Here as well, my second shot, even without the Dodge City, if I kill an enemy first, my second shot can be an elite with the layout as it is. I'm gonna grab this Outcast bounty, but we're not gonna do it. We'll just save it for some bounty cheesing somewhere in the future, as I have a pretty large contingent of them saved up. Let's go do this propaganda as well real quick. And the speed that this kind of build can work at is really nice, of course. The med pack of this can also be very handy, especially if you're expecting to take some damage. One of the things is that, yeah, we can, for instance, take that. I'm not gonna take but yeah, we can take some damage, and of course, yeah, still be at full armor by the end of it, because that med pack continues to heal over time, that armor pack. And using the shield can actually be the difference maker, especially if you lose, for instance, vigilance and stuff, for the second shot to still be able to kill an elite. But on the other hand, the bulwark is really nice as well, of course. And yeah, it is too situational, I feel, to, for instance, run this consistently. In seasons, though, that we don't have, for instance, cool skills, I would maybe sometimes run this, as especially when you can get set up for it, it can make a little bit of a difference. Especially alongside of running the Memento, for instance, where, yeah, on the second shot we can't take an elite normally, but if we have the Memento and we have this, where we have that and we have the shield up and actually the enemy within range of it, we do have actually enough, just barely to, on the second shot, down an elite with a graded weapon. So yeah, there is definitely reasons to consider specializations, and even, yeah, as we said a little bit ago, even, for instance, Gunner, just for the armor on kill, for the season where we don't have ourselves, where we have as I'm trying to kind of find if that was just the last enemy or if that was something else, where we have no regen, and no regen, of course, yeah, the being always without armor is a little bit much. There as well, we took out an elite patrol on top. One thing you can use as well is actually the specialization weapon. Same, for instance, actually with sharpshooter, of course, where the TAC 50 can be a great opener, and with that you can store an amount and then pop that out with, for instance, afterwards, a Dodge City shot. Overall, the high end is well worth considering, especially if you remember to use that Dodge City shot quite consistently. I find myself often forgetting about it. And I find myself actually often as well, especially for seasons like this, really considering the Memento a little bit more. And that leans a little bit more towards the Hunter's Fury. Let's go back to that for one final build where we'll take the Hunter's Fury, but then with Memento. And that also then is saved as the best is saved for last here, at least the one I enjoy the most overall. As going Hunter's Fury together with Memento, here with the Douglas and Harding Headhunter chest, as we discussed earlier with the numbers, taking the Chain Killer actually works well with the seasonal modifier if we had that turned on. We have that off for the entirety of this build showcase, of course, as those will differ per season, and I want these to be basically always, always up to date without it being just tied to a season. But with the seasonal modifier, with the Chain Killer, once the Memento is charged up with a grade 30 pistol and everything maxed out, we would actually be able to shoot an elite as our second shot. Here though, without that, it doesn't really make too big of a difference. Here I do have a DNH chest. I'm going to go with that. And then for the rest of it, we have done this Fury. We do have Technician again, and then together with Memento, we have a 3-tier shield being healed by a 2-tier Artificer. Once that Memento is charged up, actually this shield is pretty strong. That's what I enjoy the most about this version. We really do have a shield that we can hide behind pretty consistently. We do need to get in range again for the Hunter's Fury, but when we do, we hit pretty hard. Let's go take this around and actually just farm up some activities and just discuss some of the final things I do want to discuss. as again, one of the things that I enjoy doing the most with this is actually just using it for activities. Using it for missions and such, there are, I feel, even if you want to go headhunter better builds, especially for instance, the ability to have being able to deal with a room full of names with elites with, for instance, something more towards an 1886, but against activities where we won't face any names. I enjoy this quite a bit. So here, especially for going around, and now I have again 4 directives on because of course the 5th one doesn't want to turn on. I'm gonna pop that guy. I'm gonna use this guy as my second stack, and as you can see, I'm taking quite a bit of hits on my shield. But now with the shields being 3 tier, we don't really have the artificer really on full power yet, nor the shield actually fully charged up through the memento, but will do so. And especially going around and just getting some of these activities done. And of course, this overall, or going after some of the control points is really some of the faster ways to level. If you're doing so for global events, or for instance to get, for instance, stars for global events, or you know, just to level up for one of the 3 times or 5 times or such, yeah, these are definitely picks. The thing to remember as well is that for the time being, the harvest is available. The Regulus, of course, is always available, but the harvest is just situationally, seasonally available. And maybe going and getting one of those in anticipation of making one of these, or just to make one of these, can be well worth it. There, the Hunter's Fury buff showing me where that enemy was. Here, one of the downsides, especially if they spawn downstairs, they have a habit of going all over the place and making us, of course, take a lot more time. But yeah, let's bring explosions to his back of the head. Especially practicing aim with this is one of the great purposes of it as well. I always feel if I run this kind of build for a few days, my aim is much better by the end of it than it is at the very start. And here actually I'll show kind of my way of going around and farming up, especially some bounties and such for bounty cheesing, for instance, as yeah, multiple characters set up for doing that over there. Was as a small trick here as well is actually I'll pop a bounty in a different zone. And by doing that, we have a 15-minute timer on that. And any bounty I pick up now won't actually spawn into the zone. Because if it spawns into the zone, and if there is an activity here, for instance, and that bounty went next to it, it would actually despawn it. And of course, here we have several activities in short distance of each other. That's one thing that I also quickly want to discuss is actually the zoom level differences between these 2 pistols that we've been discussing. If we take the shield here, for instance, with the Regulus, if you pay attention to the left actually and how far it is zoomed in, my head, or my character's head, and just halfway across the shield is basically where the FOV is. This is a little bit more zoomed in than if we swap this to a harvest. Let's take that here. When I zoom in here now, you can see that actually the FOV is much wider, so we're zoomed in less than with the Regulus. Alongside of that, of course, with the Regulus, we do have a reticule and we have a center dot, and that center dot makes quite a bit of difference. It is actually much easier to find your target with that center dot. But it is actually very important to understand that, yeah, they don't have the same zoom either, nor do they have the same handling-wise the characteristics of when you come to a stop and then aim. With the Regulus, it actually becomes accurate much more quickly than it does with the Harvest, making it much more so that you can kind of snapshot, that you can have a little bit of movement without it going out of the way there. Especially here on the high end where we don't have the same handling levels as we do when we are using the high end version, with the Hunter's Fury version, I should say. We did get our 2 reds. We came in a little bit too late here to save both hostages. We won't get a bounty out of this one, but that's kind of fine. I'm gonna try to, yeah, indeed, bait the melee if we can. Now that the Memento is somewhat charged up, that shield feels a lot stronger, and we can actually just use that shield to tank with, especially if we are running it here with Technician and Artificer. All of those make quite a bit of difference. And yeah, again, very much I'm kind of paying attention now extra to just standing still and firing again. As yeah, the last few I've kind of been trying to go a little bit too fast, running around a little bit too much, and very much noticing that because of that, my aim has gotten worse. Just coming to a stop and then aiming makes quite a bit of difference. Then as well, actually paying attention to what your DPI is set to, and your sensitivity matters quite a bit. And playing around with those kind of things is things that people that kind of, you know, play around with their aim and train their aim a little bit will know. But if you didn't know, for instance, in my case, I'm setting I have a toggle where I can change how much my sensitivity changes on my mouse, where this is now basically a full wrist movement, and on the higher sensitivity I can go basically 270 degrees and then basically 90 or 180 on the lower setting. That can actually make quite a difference. So actually I'm going to toggle that, although consistency matters for that as well. So it will take a little bit of a while to get used to a different sensitivity, but once you do, especially somewhat lower sensitivities can help quite a lot with it. And that is definitely something to play around with. As you try to improve your aim, there are actually as well programs, external programs and such. But even within the Vision, actually, going around and those target practices that most of us basically never do, they're not terrible. If you try your best and try to max out how quickly you do them, basically, they can actually be decent ways of practicing aim. We do have an extra patrol here. That LMG guy is very annoying, especially as I don't know when this wave is gonna spawn. And who did we... Where are you even? Across the map. Okay, that's fine. We'll lower my stack a little bit because I shot him that far out. That means that, yeah, that I didn't hit him with my Hunter's Fury markup. And okay, it was this heavy all this time. Sir, could you stick around? No? Okay. He's very focused on just being upstairs here. And that's very annoying for me because I think no, I did, but I body shotted him there, so that didn't work out for me. So now we have to slowly work our way through this guy, and yeah, it's very frustrating. The reason is any enemy that spawns up there, really their AI kind of breaks as they try to waypoint to that position over and over again, and yeah, they kind of fail constantly. I'm gonna take my time, aim that up. Sometimes it's well worth, especially for instance with those rushers, to just take your time and just really make it land. If I just try to panic fire towards it, which I quite often do, if I miss, I'm at the very least going to lose my shield, most likely, as they'll hit my shield and blow that up to smithereens. And I'm going to pick up this bounty, and again, by having one bounty here already active, picking this one up won't spawn it in here, and that's actually a very handy thing here. As I quite often farm this zone quite a bit, and most of the time I'm going around and just grabbing bounties and just trying to maximize how many bounties I get, and such as we'll use those as well alongside when, for instance, this weekend, likely with Golden Bullet active, I'll likely use some bounty cheesing to get some stars through getting some levels. Person here, and I've had him a few times here. Yeah, he he does a Gandalf here, and you shall not pass. Yeah. I don't want to per se run through his fire, and there, especially through there, through that narrow pass, he 300s us. But yeah, we'll just get past them, as we don't per se care about these mini war hands. We have murdered enough of them. Let's go for this territory control over here, and then the public a little bit south. And that's quite often the thing that I most use these kind of builds for, is just farming, preferably with 5 directives. Again, we're on 4 because, yeah, I wish they would fix the broken directive. Last season we had it also for quite a while, and they then did fix it, but that fix apparently did not stick. Learning enemy animations is also very useful. So for instance, learning that, you know, how enemies jump over fences and such. Over time, that can be very useful, especially disorient as well, because when we disorient enemies through Hunter's Fury, it can be quite hard to hit them, but they are very predictable once you kind of understand what's happening. Here we'll have Hunter's Fury's range kind of come a little bit into play. As I kind of shut up to make that shot work, as I missed a bunch of shots there. But then Regulus actually, yeah, clearing out several enemies there as we make an explosion happen. And of course we get a retaliation as we've agitated an enemy enough to to want to come after us. We're gonna run south here real quick and get this public execution. That'll likely end our line here. But here, especially with the Memento, this being our first one with the Memento lines up really well with this build as well. Mostly I do run it solo. As you may have noticed, we haven't had really any group section in this, and that's not by mistake. I very much, to me, this is a build or a style of build that I'm mostly gonna use solo. Now, of course, yeah, you can definitely use this in a group setting. You can definitely do really well with it as well in a group setting. But I generally would not grab this in a group setting. One of the things is, as well as in, for instance, random groups, this will eat up a lot of the kills. And because of that, you're kind of, yeah, you're just being, you know, it feels a little selfish, even, you know, if that's maybe not the case, it feels a little selfish. Here we're scattering enemies around again. I left this one on, the idea with that one was to try to get them low and then, you know, leave them as my second shot, but it didn't come to pass as that other heavy kind of got in my way. Yeah, I'm gonna guess that that's where that's where that one went. And seeing as they spawn on the exact opposite corner of things, this will be a long run back. But I do want to get in range here before I actually take a shot. That group will be kind of together, but I want to be within Hunter's Fury range before I take any shots here. He's gonna die to his fire. I'm gonna quick heal here, as yeah, especially, of course, special ammo can get in the way quite a bit. This being likely the last enemy, I'm just gonna body shot him. With the last enemy, we can quite often do that because there's no other activity I'm gonna reach here anyway in 30 seconds. And might as well make it quick then. But yeah, overall, this setup is the one I enjoy the most, especially because we do have a somewhat stronger shield. Taking some of the modifiers or global events on top of this makes it really strong. And of course, when doing activities here, I'm going out of my way to kind of use the Regulus. Using the Harvest with Determined there can make it super fast, especially against outcasts like we have here. But there's a satisfaction to just actually popping heads that I quite enjoy about the Regulus. And the Regulus handling and such, and its zoom being quite a bit better, and its reticule also being a little bit better, makes that actually quite possible. And then also, just getting good at this is a skill that will transfer into a lot of other places. There is really a good reason to practice your aim with builds like this. And with that, we come to the conclusion of this long and long-awaited build showcase. It turned out into a little bit more into almost an build masterclass. As yeah, we did go over multiple styles of builds, and then also together with that, of course, kind of two distinct builds by themselves, the Hunter's Fury variants and the high-end variants, together with the two pistols that gets used for this the most. Both of the variants in the high-end and in the Hunter's Fury are well worth considering. And yeah, definitely there is no better amongst them. Each of them has its pros and cons, and especially aligning them with the directives available for that season, that really makes a difference. With a season like this, where we have things like with no regen on, yeah, having a memento in there really makes a difference. But for instance, the Hunter's Fury's armor on kill that we get also actually makes a difference. And because of that, it is going to be situational. Also, the Hunter's Fury will need to be a little bit closer to the enemy, where, for instance, the high-end gets to be a little bit further away and still be mostly at full damage. And but that comes at the cost of all of the benefits of Hunter's Fury in that disorient, in that stacking buff that it has. And even, for instance, its mark showing enemies and where they exactly are. As if you have two enemies behind the car, but you only thought there was one, with Hunter's Fury, you definitely will know that there are two there when you get close enough. And all of those make it quite a difference. It is well worth making both. The Hunter's Fury one is definitely easier to put together with the high-end pieces, of course, requiring one extra stat on top. As a small tip as well here, if you are going for the Hunter's Fury version, it can be very nice if you're making it just to go out and farm some pieces with Headshot, especially if you have the resources to optimize quite a bit, as then you can recore the core, and this can be useful especially for reanimated. Then as far as the weapons go, the Harvest, of course, is only a seasonal item. If you don't have either Regulus or the Harvest available to you, going for a 686 is your next likely best bet. The Harvest is generally around with any of the seasonal events. Currently, at the time of this video releasing, it is of course available from the mini war hands. In the future, it'll likely be again on the Hoarder when Christmas comes around, for instance, the holiday season comes around. But it isn't always available, and because of that, it is well worth getting a Detox one, a Damage Stars out of cover one that you can re-talent freely, as you do want to play around with the talent here and there. Today, we mostly showed this with Determined, as that's kind of the go-to for it, but you definitely can play around with the talent here and get decent results. And then, of course, for the Regulus itself, it is from Iron Horse. You will need to do Iron Horse 3 times, and also at least over a span of 2 weeks. For most players, actually over the span of 3 weeks, unless you have an alternate character to help you out with that. But it is actually very doable. If you are interested in getting this done, there are a lot of places that can help you achieve that goal. So there are a lot of community places where, for instance, several streamers, co-streamers, for instance, Toasty or Lil Huge or GC Rock or DJ Tickle, have communities or themselves helping people reach the completion of the raids and incursions and even legendaries and such. And you basically sign up and they'll help you along. As long as you're basically not a complete abject asshole, you'll likely get to the end of it. You don't need to be the greatest player. You're with some of the greatest players and they'll help you get through it very easily. They can basically carry a person that isn't even there. So in those cases, yeah, you can kind of sign up for those and just go and get it done. It isn't actually per se too hard. You don't even need to, for instance, communicate too much. You just need to sign up, be there on time, and yeah, run with these people and kind of just listen to what they need you to do, which is very little. Usually it's just basically, hey, just watch this one door and kill whatever enemy comes out of it. And that shouldn't be too hard for anybody. Now, overall, the Regulus is well worth getting because to me, it is definitely a step up from the harvest. The harvest, though, with determined is very quick, and especially in reanimated, yeah, I can make very quick work of activities. The Regulus does require you to hit heads, but when it does, it has a different effect on target than the harvest, with especially those explosions cleaning out the place. But overall as well, just having actually going for that skill of getting headshots in consistently is well worth it, as yeah, that makes quite a difference and makes it enjoyable, but it's also a skill that you're cultivating. Because more than anything that this build needs is aim. Now, in the future, we'll likely do an aim toolbox, but aim is one of those skills that is the least transferable, I feel. It is one of those where you just need to take the time and just play and just make sure that you get your time in on it, and eventually you'll get better, hopefully. And yeah, it is definitely doable, as most of the people, it can be very disparaging when you start out and you're not landing enough headshots to really make it work and go like, oh, I'll just go back to whatever I was doing before. But if you stick to it, I promise that you will get better. In my case as well, for instance, for the last few days, I've played around with running Headhunter, and yeah, actually, as we recorded this build showcase live on stream, as we always do, a lot got cut out, I will say, on this one. As, yeah, I'm not the best Headhunter, but also I don't need to be, but then also I was talking along of it, and yeah, that definitely gets in the way a little bit, so I'll use that as an excuse. But also, even if you don't perform at the top levels with this, it is still actually much quicker, even with a few deaths, than some of the other ways, especially if you're going for that 5 directives. And that's always the strength of these, of course. The 5 directives that we can take with this is basically every season you can take any of the 5 directives. And yeah, so yeah, thank you for joining me on this build showcase. For future videos, we're going to continue into that stats explained, as we still have blue and yellow stats to cover. We will also go into a retaliation only tips, and also actually a video going over gear sets, as I want to basically cover all the gear sets and kind of what you can do with them. And even a video maybe on, for instance, rating them and maybe giving them some tiering. For the next build showcase, we'll go into tipping skills, as that's definitely on the menu, having been added with the start of this season. I definitely wanted to spend some time with it. That's also why usually those kind of build showcases come at the end of a season. So I hope you joined me for those. If you did enjoy this video, please do any and all of the algorithm things down below, as it does always help out. So do that little bit of shilling here. And as always, have a good night.